Sometimes the only way is the hard way. Let's review Evil Dead 2013. Evil Dead stars Jane Levy, Shiloh Fernandez, and is directed by Fede Alvarez. What's up, guys? I'm super excited. We are reviewing the Evil Dead remake, one of my all-time favorite remakes ever. I don't know why it took me this long to review it. I've always wanted to review it. Thanks to Matt Casey, I'm reviewing it now. Matt is one of my patrons, and if you are of a certain tier, then you get a review in your honor. And for Matt, I'm doing all 4 Evil Dead movies, and I asked him if I could start with this one because I love it so much. It's near and dear to my heart. Don't hate me, guys. I might prefer it over all 4 Evil Dead movies just because of how different it is. I have the, I think this was a Target Steelbook that I got when this first came out years and years ago. I love this Steelbook though, it's beautiful. But looking forward to diving deep into this movie. Wow, man, this is probably the most graphic remake, even though I don't like to call this a remake because it's technically not a remake. They're very careful about not really laying out the timeline of this movie. They don't try to directly acknowledge the previous movies whatsoever. Of course, there's some Easter eggs in there and winks and nods, but for the most part, this is its own thing, all the way down to how the Deadites are presented. You know, the Deadites aren't, tongue-in-cheek funny in this movie at all, like they were in like Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness. This is even more serious than the first movie. And the first movie is relentless, unbearable. And I think that's what Fede Alvarez was going for with this one. Let's take that first movie that doesn't hold back whatsoever, that never lets you up, and let's make it even darker, make it even scarier. And my God, Fede Alvarez, just his handling of this movie is, you can tell it's a labor of love. Every frame in this movie looks glorious.
Mia! Put the fucking gun down!
There was a lot of concern when this movie was announced that there was going to be a lot of CGI because of the time that it was made. But luckily, Fede Alvarez, for the most part, made this practical. And luckily, he had the support, the backup from the producers in the studio. Sam Raimi produced this, was one of the producers of this. So he had Sam Raimi's full blessing. So anyway, let's dive in. First off, quick plot synopsis. This movie opens, again, we don't know what time frame this is. Could be like, 30, 40 years ago, 100 years ago, who knows? You have this young girl and she's held captive in this cellar. And at first you think she's the victim. She's been kidnapped by these group of people. But eventually you realize that it's her that's evil. She's a Deadite, and one of the characteristics of the Deadites...
I will rip your soul out, Daddy. I'll rip your soul out, you pathetic fuck!
They will use your relationship with your loved ones against them. You know, they can turn off the Deadite and turn on your normal self to sway the family. And that's what they try to do, but then eventually she goes full Deadite and they have to kill her. And that freaking, the gunshot, like you could feel that when he freaking, plus he's having to kill his own daughter. But right away, this movie is not holding back. And so then we jump to, I guess, the present day. We have our core 5 main characters. There's a reason that there's 5 of them that ties into the plot. But you have Mia, her brother David, Olivia, Natalie, and Eric. The purpose of them being there is because David's sister, Mia, played by Jane Levy, she is a drug addict. And this, I think, was a genius premise because how are you going to keep somebody there at that cabin after all this crazy shit starts happening, And it's hard to do that. So I thought it was great that they made this a drug addict because you can't believe anything a drug addict says. And so every time that she goes crazy, they're like, I'm not buying it. And we buy it. We buy that they wouldn't leave that house. And at first, Mia, she wants to put on the good foot. She wants to try to go cold turkey and beat this thing. But she gets this bad feeling about the house, the cabin. And so she tries to leave. And this is where the movie gets freaking insane. Because remember in the original movie when one of the characters, she's attacked by a tree. She's sexually assaulted by a tree. So we're thinking, oh, they're going to shy away from that in the remake, right? They're not going to do that. Nope, wrong. They definitely do it because, again, Fede Alvarez, he wanted to honor the original. Even though Sam Raimi himself is not a fan of that scene and he wishes that he would have never used that scene in the original movie. Fede Alvarez says, you know what? We got to cover everything. Because that is one of the reasons why Evil Dead is legendary, because it wasn't afraid to go there. And I've talked quite a few times on my channel about how not all horror movies are fun. Sometimes horror movies have to shock because otherwise, what's the point? To really dig in psychologically and sometimes poke at you, push buttons, trigger you even. And that's what this movie does. But also that scene, just from a directing standpoint, is just beautifully shot, amazing looking. And I think it works not only because of Fede Alvarez's hard work and commitment and patience to try to draw out the best scene he can, but also by the performance of Jane Levy. This was her first big horror role, and she's hungry. She's going for it. And man, she's just a force in this movie because she has to play two things, really. She has to play a drug addict, but she's also got to play somebody who's possessed. And there could be a fine line between the two. No, not really. You can tell when she's possessed. But at first you can. At first you would think, okay, I can see why they think that she's kind of a little wacky. Because, she's not visually showing the signs. It's not as upfront. But in the escape scene, when she's trying to get away, and she's in the forestry and all that, and you see the demon, which looks just like Mia. I like how Fede Alvarez gave the demon some slight differences, so you could definitely tell that it wasn't her, that they were two different entities. But right away, this movie is scary, guys. It's freaky. I remember seeing this movie in the theater, and I think a lot of Evil Dead fans were there. As a matter of fact, the guy that was in front of me, I remember he kept fist bumping at certain scenes, but it was mostly just the scenes that were winking at the original movie. He was obviously a big fan of the original movie, but I wasn't thinking of it like that at all. I was just into the actual story, the plot of the movie that was happening in front of me. And I was just like, wow, I've never seen a remake go this far. And we haven't even gotten to when she gets back to the cabin and when she infects, her friends.
Kunda.
Also, another really interesting character in the movie was Eric, because he's the guy that sets this whole thing into motion. They have the Book of the Dead there, and it's wrapped in this black plastic with barbed wire over it. Obviously, they didn't want anybody to reopen this thing, but his curiosity gets the best of him. He opens it up, and in the book, it's constantly saying, don't read this, don't open this, beware. And what does he do?
Honda.
I think the demon itself is part of the book. And once you look at it, I think it just kind of grabs him psychologically. And it almost just lures the words out, seductively. And so I've heard a lot of people say, why would he read that if he's seeing all these things? And I don't think it's fully him. I think the demon is seducing him a little bit. So anyway, once Mia gets back to the cabin, of course, she's going crazy. She's like, we got to get out of here. And again, Jane Levy's performance, it's haunting. There's a desperation to the character that she really is able to pull out. But in order for the true demon to come out, it has to have 5 souls, and they go through all these different steps. One being scalding the host with hot water, which we see Mia in the shower. One is tearing of the flesh, which the character Olivia, she literally takes a knife and cuts her face and cuts her skin off. And they show it in graphic detail. The camera doesn't shy away at all. This movie's hardcore. It's edgy as hell. Then the scene where Natalie cuts her arm off, that's kind of a wink to Evil Dead 2 when his hand goes crazy. There's just a little bit of that in that scene, but it doesn't take over the scene at all. You know, they focus on just the gore and just the shock, because I think one reason why these scenes are so shocking is it's not just a gunshot. And there is a 12 gauge in here, like in the first movie, but everybody can relate to cutting themselves. And, you know, we know that, you know, the idea of cutting your arm off, just how painful that would be, because, you know, again, we've cut ourselves before, and even that hurts. So I think that just makes the scenes that much more visceral, because you can really imagine it happening. You know, like I said, we've all cut ourselves before. I like how they focused on that idea for the violence. A razor blade, cutting your tongue. They take that idea, and then below the cellar, you got Mia, and she literally takes a razor blade and cuts her own tongue in half. And just seeing that scene, you can't help but just go, oh my God. Like, you can almost feel it. That's what this movie does with the violence. It takes it that much further, kind of into your subconscious. Like, you could feel, like almost feel the violence. It's like a scratch and sniff movie, right? Well, I guess I would call it a scratch and bleed. Now, amongst all this violence, I think the thing that works so well for the Evil Dead remake is the connection between the brother and the sister. David is an interesting character, because this is a guy who was not at his mother's funeral. His mother was in a mental ward, and when she died, he wasn't there for her. And so he's always had this regret. And Mia was the one that was there for her. And so, again, once all this stuff starts happening, he starts shying away. He has this fear. He has this fear of confrontation, which I can relate to that, because I have a fear of confrontation. I don't like it. It's uncomfortable. And that's what happens with David. And so I think the movie's beautiful, because in the end, he has to be the one to step up and make this right. You know, he has to bury his sister and kill her in order for her to come back. And that scene's beautiful too, when right as he's about to start pouring the dirt on her face, you know, she says this line like, "Why do you hate me, David?"
Why do you hate me, David? I know you do. You left home. You left me all alone with our sick mother.
And of course, it's not her, it's the demon. And that's what the demon does. It turns your own insecurities against you. And that's what it does. Eventually, David ends up giving his life for his sister. Like, that's the ultimate gift that you could give your loved one, to give your life. And that's what he does. And so then Mia comes back, and then you have the big showdown with the rain. It's raining blood. Let's talk about blood for a minute. How much blood do you think they used for this freaking movie, right? There have been estimates of up to 70,000 gallons of blood, and 20,000 of those gallons being for the raining blood scene. This movie is just completely bathed in blood. And to me, it's very symbolic. You know, it's kind of like a symbol of rebirth, you know, because Mia just was brought back to life. It's like she was given a second chance by her brother, and her brother's like, don't waste this, okay? And so she gets her second chance, and she just really goes for broke trying to fight the demon. When the Jeep falls on her arms, she severs her own hand, literally rips it. It's not a clean cut at all. She rips it from the Jeep. And then she grabs the chainsaw. And probably one of the craziest kills I've ever seen in a movie, when she literally thrusts the chainsaw through the face of the demon.
Face on this motherfucker!
And by that time, I'm freaking cheering. I love this movie so much, guys. I freaking love the hell out of this remake. Easily in my top 3 remakes of all time. If I'm counting The Thing, then this might be number 2, number 3. It's so good that I prefer it over the rest of the franchise. And I know that's a tall, tall order. I don't think it's nearly as important as the first movie. No, don't get me wrong. But from an entertainment standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, I think this is better than the first movie in terms of emotion. Like, I love the character Mia so much in this movie. Originally, they were going to have her team up with Ash for a sequel to this. I'm kind of glad they didn't. I like that this movie stands on its own. But yeah, anyway, for a rating, Trapped on an Island. By far, this is a Trapped on an Island. And I love this movie to death. So anyway, guys, that's my review for the Evil Dead remake. I'm going to be reviewing the rest of the movies. I'll probably start with the first movie and then work to Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness over the next couple of months. Thank you, Matt, for requesting this one. Had a blast discussing this movie. Let me know your thoughts on Evil Dead in the comments below. Looking forward to hearing them. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day, and on Fridays we do Free Fall Fridays. Follow me on my socials at Drumdums. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. And one by one, we will take you